This is Kevin Freeman from the Economic War Room. We've been looking into this issue of China infiltrating our markets and really the danger of having our thrift savings plan invested into Chinese stocks. Now, in the War Room, we did a special episode which will be airing, and it will include Roger Robinson and Kyle Bass and Lieutenant Colonel Alan West. But beyond that, we brought in some actual veterans, people who laid their lives on the line for this nation, and asked them how they felt about their money being invested in companies that might be a threat to our nation. One of those individuals was Alan Clark. Here's a man who left 2 legs in Vietnam. He was a wounded warrior. He served in the Veterans Administration. He served in the state of Texas, a wonderful gentleman. And he was shocked to find out that he couldn't invest in international securities unless he invested into China if they make this decision. The Thrift Savings Plan represents the money of patriotic men and women in the armed services, or veterans, or retirees from government, or actual government employees. And the idea that they could be forced with their international funds to invest in our adversary, that's shocking. And when you learn from Roger Robinson what some of these companies that will be receiving American money do, it's frightening. So I stand with the Committee on the Present Danger as a proud member to say we must stop this decision of the Thrift Savings Plan. This board must recognize that it is not an issue of, well, it might make economic sense. It makes no economic sense, and it certainly doesn't make national security sense. This is Kevin Freeman from the Economic War Room. Right now, in the Thrift Savings Plan, as you know, it's invested in the United States, and you can invest in foreign countries also through the MSCI EFA index. That's Morgan Stanley Capital International. And the EFA is Europe, Australia, Far East. It basically is the developed markets of the world.
Sure.
But there's a new push. We need to move it to the MSCI All Country World Index. Now, do you know all the ins and outs?
Well, the thing is that when you start talking about all country index, when you start talking about this globalism, the thing that I think that we have failed to understand is that China learned a lesson from the collapse of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union did not collapse militarily. The Soviet Union collapsed economically.
That's right.
And what the Chinese understood is that, somehow we've got to maintain our philosophy of governance, being the socialist communist model. But yet, how can we inject ourselves into this globalist market? How can we use capitalism to bolster us and keep us in the position that we're in and become like a tick to all of these Western economic nations and make it so hard for them to be removed, because all of a sudden, next thing you know, you can get Lyme disease.
So how they do that is they suck out intellectual property.
Yes.
They've hacked the American system. They demand that corporations
technology transfers.
You've got to give us your technology if you want to enter our markets. But now there's a whole new and more insidious thing, is they're actually seeking to get American capital. They've gotten stocks on our stock exchange.
Sure.
And they've asked for a lot of investments in things that we don't really know what they're doing.
It's about expanding their, not regional, but global hegemonic dominance. And the fact that we are looking at extending investments to help China to grow and build their military and their totalitarian regime is unconscionable that we would be doing that. I mean, I might as well give you my concealed carry weapon and make sure you have plenty of bullets and say, shoot me in the head.
For me, it's important to say, we're not just going to stop the Thrift Savings Plan from investing in the MSCI All World because of China. What we should be saying is, now China's the worst offender. However, we should be saying that we should not commit the Thrift Savings Plan or that money of any retiree in the U.S. into a company that doesn't submit itself to audits, that isn't Dodd-Frank compliant, that doesn't adhere to the same standards as U.S. securities do, U.S. companies do to raise money here.
So this is almost an Enron question as much as anything else.
Big, yeah, it's as big, because if you've got companies that are in China or Russia, which, as you know, are adversaries of ours, or pick another country, pick Brazil or pick Argentina, that might have a company that wants to raise money in the U.S. that doesn't submit itself to an audit or isn't Dodd-Frank compliant, why should we allow them to raise money?
Explain that. The company doesn't submit itself to an audit. What does that mean? When we're investing in Chinese companies, they're not the same as investing in U.S.?
That's correct. So Chinese companies, the Chinese government has basically stipulated that audits of their companies are national security concerns, and therefore they should be exempt. And so when you look at all of the companies, the 160 plus companies listed here that are particularly Chinese ADRs, none of those companies submit themselves to a true covered audit as deemed to be an audit by the Public Accounting Oversight Board in the U.S., the PCAOB.
So we don't know when they report earnings that those are actually what they're reporting. They're certainly not on our standards, and they're certainly not measured in the same way that we measure our companies.
Our auditors have never been let in, meaning the big four, the auditors that we know and trust in the U.S. But when you bring up Enron, you think about Enron, WorldCom, you think about some of the biggest frauds in the U.S., and they actually submitted themselves to U.S. audit standards. Imagine how bad the numbers really are of companies that refuse to submit themselves to audits. And that's where all of that money's going. And again, China's the worst offender, but there are many other offenders on that list. It's just less market cap, less focus. But I'm of the opinion that we shouldn't allow any foreign companies raise money in the United States that don't adhere to U.S. law. I know that sounds like a crazy idea, but as we sit today, that is exactly how they're raising money.